Chess is a foolish expedient for making
On the
idle
chessboard,
people believe
lies
they're
and
doing something
hypocrisy do
clever,
not
when their
survive
only way to
blunders
time.
are all
The
there
laws of
on
chess
the board,
do not permit a free
waiting to
choice.
be made.
You have to move,
I am
whether
still
you
a
like it
victim
or
of
not.
chess. It has all the beauty of art, and much more.
Chess doesn't drive people mad. It keeps mad people sane.
The year is 1959, and within the Russian research facility at Vostok, a man is murdered with an axe. In 2014, Irishman Tom O'Gorman is murdered by Italian Silvario Belanti in Castleknock, Dublin. During the trial, the coroner would report that O'Gorman suffered multiple stab wounds to the head and neck, possessed a gaping chest wound, and was missing most of his right lung and heart. Belanti had eaten them. O'Gorman happens to share his name with FIDE master Tom O'Gorman, one of Ireland's strongest ever chess players. Finally, the year 1780 saw Scotsman Matthew Hay convicted of killing a man, and in 1990 the Old Bailey tried Brian Roberts for attempted murder. His victim's name? Matthew Hay. From murderer to victim. These grisly tales, some true, some apocryphal urban legend, do all possess a common denominator. In all of these cases, victim and murderer were playing a game of chess. That is not to say that we should blame chess for these moments of madness, but its being there is curiously remindful of chess's special relationship with the concept of madness. These men contribute to a chess madness urban legend, and it's this socially constructed madness that I'm interested in. The one of language, not medical textbooks. Madness can be a lot of things, but I like to think of madness like a black hole, because like a black hole, we cannot observe madness directly, but we can understand madness by its event horizon, how it twists and manipulates the concepts in its orbit, like chess. And like a black hole, diving into madness will spaghettify the mind, just as diving into a black hole will spaghettify matter. Information rarely leaves the gravity of either. I think this is what literary theorist Shoshana Fellman, who having mused on the struggle of making sense with something that dismantles the very laws of sense-making, meant when she wondered if writing madness and writing about it, speaking madness and speaking of it would eventually converge, somewhere where they least expect to meet. And might it not be at that meeting place that one could situate precisely writing? Fellman's belief that literary writing might not just only speak truths about madness, but of it as well, suggests literary writing is a kind of rope from which we can perilously dangle into madness as an experience. This video studies how some literary texts have explored the relationship between themselves, the Game of Kings, and madness, with the hope that within literature's delightful lies lies a greater truth about chess and the beings that created it. Stefan Zweig's The Royal Game is a novella partially about a man, somewhat about the brutal political events of the early 20th century, and is more than a little about chess. But foremost, it is a story about the self-fulfilling dangers of repetition. How the comfort of human places can, with the right amount of suffering and isolation, give rise to madness's special capacity for human annihilation. Written by an Austrian-Hungarian Jewish man during the Nazi occupation of Austria, the story follows the chance encounter between fictional chess champion Mirko Centovic and Dr. B, whose chess ability is rivalled only by his chess mania. By the by, Centovic is a Philistine for whom chess is a singular talent, One suggested when his priestly carer cries, "Balaam's ass," when he discovers the boy's precocious chess talents, harkening back to the biblical story of Balaam and the ass. Long story short, the ass is given the gift of wise speech, a miracle, just like Centovic here, whose meteoric and inexplicable rise to the top of the chess world, alongside such greats as Alekhine, Lasker, Capablanca, Bogolyubov, I think is supposed to mirror the self-same meteoric and, to Zweig, inexplicable rise of fascism that sees him exiled to Brazil. How can one expect that such rapid fame should fail to befuddle so empty a head? Our narrator's companion wonders of Centovic, whose chess ability is used exclusively for profit and low-minded power. Anyway, having manoeuvred a near-losing group of players to a draw against Centovic, our nameless protagonist, being an Austrian like Dr. B, seeks the Doctor to cajole him into a one-on-one game with Centovic, and the Doctor hesitantly agrees and tells us and the narrator his story. Dr. B was an important person to the Austria-ransacking Gestapo, for his family were close to the Austrian monarchy and the church, and this closeness might have conferred upon Dr. B some knowledge regarding the location of untold wealth and power. Given this presumed intelligence, they spared him the concentration camp, but he was by no means spared the Nazis' cruelty. For the pressure by which they planned to compel the needed testimony was to be exerted more subtly than through common beating or physical torture, by the most conceivably complete isolation. They did nothing to us. They merely deposited us in the midst of nothing, knowing well that of all things the most potent pressure on the soul of man is nothingness. In this complete isolation, the Gestapo deferred to a person's internal torturer, the dark, nourished portion of the soul of man that, if not fed with a gross rank anything, will turn to eat itself, himself, yourself. Perhaps hell is other people, perhaps hell is no people at all, but I would argue that hell is simply the cessation of experience awake. So many of us are afraid of dying. But I must ask, have you ever considered the alternative? In that personal hell, Dr. B calls for salvation, and he is answered when, within a Gestapo militia coat, he spies a book, though hoping for some literary masterpiece, a Goethe or Homer perhaps. He is driven to bitter vexation when he finds no Hölderlin, no Schiller, not even a Schopenhauer, but a chess anthology. With little else to do, Dr. B puzzles through this tome, and after painstakingly shaping scraps of bread into kings, queens, clergy and castle, he goes from amateur to expert, eventually dispensing with the board entirely, having projected the pieces within himself. Seeing them in the mind's eye as one might a loved one, so vividly so as for them to be visible to the actual eye. Now, where have I seen that before? But books don't go on forever. Dr. B, now once again staring down the barrel of indefinite nothingness, bifurcates his mind, something Dr. B likens to trying to jump over one's shadow. Ego white and ego black, two minds in one. Perhaps more than two minds in one, as the two egos are not happy playmates, often violently urging each other to play quicker, better, more. The egos, striving yet failing to appease Dr. B's needs, can only heap shovel after shovel of chess games upon it, but like trying to bury a shadow, the need always jumps to the top, crying for more. Dr. B lost weight, trembled with impatience, called angrily, quicker, quicker, and go on, as if the egos, having vacated their privileged adjudicative position to play chess, create a vacuum for the tyrannical nothingness of his imprisonment to fill. Chess moved from cure to poison, though it is the chess madness that allows a sympathetic doctor to declare him insane and secure his release. So it may be said that chess cures his physical imprisonment, yet immures him in one of the mind. Perhaps chess is both a poison and a cure. Something salvific and annihilating at the same time. After Dr. B defeats Centovic in their first game, Centovic offers another, and Dr. B, descending back down into Chess's dark forest, is saved from all-consuming madness by an amateur's infelicity. Unable to discern reality from his fantasy, Dr. B attempts to give a bishop check to a king that's safely behind its own pawns. After this, Dr. B resigns the game, escaping ahead of the chess-addled egos just in time, and vows to never succumb to the temptations of chess ever again. Zweig's The Royal Game is a novel about pain's cyclical nature. Zweig constructs Dr. B carefully as a man caught between two infinitudes. The absolute nothingness so damaging to the soul on the one side, and the infinite complexity of chess on the other. Therein perhaps lies the truth. Chess can save you in ways that nothingness cannot, because within its endlessness there are specks of comfort, islets of knowledge that we can dwell in, like the Sicilian defence, the Spanish game, or the London system. Comforting in trying times, but beware that its embrace does not turn to suffocation, and hope that, for you, it can be a part of a good life, not all of a wasted one. From a literary perspective, Zweig's deployment of chess highlights how, through its capacity for monomaniacal behaviour and its infinitude, it affords fiction a kind of playful tragic mode. It allows literature to access those areas where pain and play collude and collide. It gives literature a taste of its inherent compulsion to self-destruction that was seared into the very being of chess when it was decided that we could skip no moves. And yet Zweig's The Royal Game gives this compulsion to move in the face of terrible consequences, this Zugzwang, back to chess somehow enriched, transposed to hold the unholdable suffering of a Jewish man at the hands of the Third Reich. The Royal Game is literature's immortal Zugzwang, and I wonder if Zweig forgot more about Zugzwang than any chess grandmaster has ever known. If the Royal Game gives us literary chess's tragic mode, how chess can be used to invoke a sense of loss, sadness or unfairness, Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita gives us chess's comic mode in spades, to mix our game metaphors a little. A tale of book burning, religion, love, temptation, and a little chess, Bulgakov's 1966 posthumous text reigns supreme as one of the 20th century's greatest fantasy stories. It also almost wasn't. Bulgakov, driven to despair by censorship at the USSR's hands, burnt his first Master and Margarita manuscript, a practice echoed by the Master, a character in the novel and a novelist himself, doing the same to his manuscripts. However, we're going to focus on a single chapter here, the chess game chapter, and in particular, how it relates to the location of the novel, Russia. When you think of Russia, a few things might pop into your head. Enthusiastically drinking vodka, the planned economic policies of communism. But there are negative connotations as well, like chess. Russia has dominated world chess since the early 20th century, and I want to show how putting this game into focus through a Russian lens creates a very specific reflective context in and of itself. But to digress, this reflectiveness is not just Bulgakov's to have, however, as another Russian, deemed similarly degenerate by the USSR, would reflect Bulgakov's masterpiece in a most stunning way. And it's just down the road from me. His name was Eduard Besudsky, and to help explain The Master and Margarita in chess, we're going to the greatest Russo-Glaswegian 20th century connection since treating life expectancy like a limbo stick. It's Shamanka, baby! These forms you see here are called kinetic sculptures, assemblages that, using all manner of pulleys, weights and releases, are brought to life for the viewer's pleasure and bemusement. A bit like chess, they do artistic expression two ways. One way is through the stasis, in a manner similar to everyday sculpture, but another in motion, and when in motion they are able to tell a dynamic story. Chess beauty also relies on this balance of stillness and movement. There's something beautiful about the opening arrangement. It's ordered, equal, pregnant with possibility, and then another beauty rears up in the dynamic entropy wrought upon it by players. A narrative born of questions emerges. Will the tenacious attack crash through, or falter? Will the positional player's best laid plans squeeze the game to bursting? Or will the tactician find an ember of activity and transform it into fire on board? Stillness and movement, closed and open, order and chaos. So chess's great eternal conversation roars, able to say all of these things at once in a way that nothing else really can. Well, nearly nothing. This is one of Pilsudski's kinetic sculptures, and its name is The Master and Margarita.
The quotation we're going to be discussing in a minute concerns a chess game between those two fellas in the centre there, which occurs when Margarita first meets Woland and his retinue. Fortunately, Pilsudski decided to keep our chess players together. Our horned black magician carrying a sword and a skull is quite clearly Woland. Swinging in the foreground there is one of Master and Margarita's greatest breakout characters, Behemoth. But we'll come to him a bit later. You see the two figures perched on the top there? They represent an interspersed narrative in the novel concerning Yeshua, who's Jesus essentially, and Pontius Pilate. Neither of them are particularly known for their chess, so we're going to ignore that for now. Margarita. Woland's chosen the hostess for his spring ball, and having proven to be an excellent host, Woland gives her a choice. She can stay with him forever as a hell-raising witch, or she can have her deepest wish granted, which happens to be her reunion with her lover, the Master. And true love wins the day, and they spend eternity together in limbo. You should go and read the book, it's very good.
On the chessboard, meanwhile, confusion reigned. Distraught, the White King was stamping about on his square and waving his arms in desperation. 3 white pawns, armed with halberds, were staring in bewilderment at a bishop who was waving his cressier and pointing forwards to where Woland's black knight sat mounted on 2 hot-blooded horses, one pawing the ground of a white square, the other on a black square. Margarita was fascinated by the game and amazed to see that the chessmen were alive. As even a middling chess player will know, put to paper here is the arse-brain mayhem of the middle game. Bulgakov conjures the middle game in several ways. Consider the relative lack of conjunctions here, a literary technique known as ascendeton. These commas quicken the reading speed, but conjunctions also signpost an easy sense of contingency and continuity between sentence clauses. Without them, we're as the game Othello is to Shakespeare's play, unmoored. To every wood-pushing simpleton like me goes the pleasure that such insubordinate personification is mere fantasy. I'd hate to think what the pieces would say about my marshalling. This personification also allows Bulgakov to spew off multiple perspectives, further irritating a sense of consensus. The king's on a one-way trip to Suplex City and he knows it. The pawns either don't know or don't care. The bish seems to propose a pawn storm the same side as his king because he's a fucking idiot. And Wolan's knights straddle two hot-blooded horses who don't pass judgment admittedly, but I absolutely wouldn't trust them with my wallet. I'd guess this chess hellscape inspired some other fantasy chess scenes, but there ain't no one rushing to credit the Russian. It's a proper shit joke. Bulgakov has painted a little of the carnival atmosphere onto chess's usual severity, a clownishness shared amongst all the pieces on the board regardless of rank, and a little of that grotesquerie trickles up into our players. Woland, the travelling professor with a devilish secret, and Behemoth, the bow-tied, hog-sized, kiss-stealing, pistol-wielding cat. Behemoth's chess enthusiasm outstrips his chess ability, it seems, and given his method of analysis took the peculiar form of pulling faces and winking at his king, some skullduggery is in order. Behemoth's winking increased until at last the White King guessed what was required of him. He suddenly pulled off his cloak, dropped it on his square, and walked off the board. The bishop picked up the royal cloak, threw it round his shoulder, and took the king's place. How can you checkmate a kingless chess team? Now madness has brought the game into terminal disrepute, and it is only out of respect for Woland's exasperation, "Do you resign the game or not?" shouted Woland in a terrible voice. Does Behemoth concede his carnival chess battle? What are we to learn of Bulgakov's Behemoth chess with its living pieces, its multiplicity of voices, and its Mad Hatter Tea Party King Patsy? Let's think about the order of chess first, and plot our way back to this chaos. You see, chess is such an expedient metaphor for social order because it's so obviously hierarchical. The king is simply more important than the queen, is simply more important than the rook, is simply more important than cavalry and clergy, and so on. So by voicing the perspectives of all pieces simultaneously, Bulgakov is flipping the top-down power dynamics of chess, opening a space to reimagine where the power on the board is, and what values matter when allocating power. We as readers are supposed to reflect, for example, on the inherent vacuousness at the heart of the Master and Margarita King, whose power transfers through something as symbolic and vacuous as a cloak, and does so convincingly, so as to fool the devil himself for a moment. Keep in mind that Bulgakov had a contentious relationship with Russia's politics at the time. Joseph Stalin in particular took a keen interest in Bulgakov's work, apparently enjoying his 1926 play The Day of the Turbine so much he watched it over a dozen times, yet frequently subjected Bulgakov's work to censorship and redaction. Are we to understand this as political critique of Russia's at the time Stalinist government, perhaps suggesting they had conferred power to themselves with the very royal cloak of the Tsars, which they themselves pledged to destroy? Are we to understand the logic of chess madly upturned as commendable, perhaps even instructive? The answer, as with most satire, depends on who's asking. Are they comrades or the Kremlin? Models of analogy allow writers more brevity than comedy or manifesto would allow discreetly. To say two different things to two different groups with the same words, now that's a way with words. Also, if the secret police were to find a rare constable who knows how to read, there's plausible deniability. Why are you wasting precious state time bothering the man who creates stories about big cats and chess for children, comrade? Bulgakov might have said, if someone ever heavily rapped his door, as law enforcement are wont to do. It's how satirists have dodged the noose since antiquity, and chess, rich with possibilities of hidden tales of real-world despots and monarchs, allows writing to express the world's madness while defending the writer from reproach. And what better way for Russians like Pilsudski and Bulgakov to ridicule their country's particular madness than through its adopted particular game? I cannot say whether Bulgakov or Pilsudski were chess players of skill or magnitude, but both understood that in redressing chess in its own ways, they could challenge, reinforce and complicate their nation's identity with a light touch, one that even an authoritarian's thin skin might fail to register. The endgame is often framed in mechanical terms. Brute force calculation supersedes the comfortable repetition of the opening or the swashbuckling adventures of the middle game, but I want to suggest a different approach. To do so, I want to enlist perhaps the most famous literary depiction of chess, and perhaps literary chess's most famous heroine. Who is she? And who on this board does she represent? If chess has a heroine, one might assume she'd be a queen, but I'm not so sure that's the right piece for our leading lady. No. Queenliness is for her deferred. It's more a destination, a fate, a process, a becoming that's narrative is to be respected. She's a pawn, and that might sound harsh, but pawns get a bad rap. In fact, I'm of the opinion that as you become better at chess, the more important these little guys become to your strategy. And we've known of their importance since at least 1749, when one of chess's old masters, Francois-André Philidor, would stake his claim to chess history on the demystification of the good play of the pawns. They are the soul of chess. They are of all the pieces the most human, I think. Like us, they are exceptionally resilient and painfully fragile. Like us, they sometimes work in mysterious ways. En passant! But most like us, they can never move backwards. Their dogged march forward shares much in common with our one-way ticket on time's arrow. And because of this, they seem to follow a narrative of their own, and like many a good story, theirs is a tale of one thing after another, one step, usually, at a time. Her name is Alice, and the endgame is a fairy tale, where princesses transform into queens. Through the Looking Glass by mathematician and novelist Lewis Carroll is an ambiguous text at nearly every level. Even in the illustrations, there's a lot of room for interpretation. Here's Tenniel's depiction of the scene where Alice makes the fateful journey through the Looking Glass, and here's the same scene, this time illustrated by Mervyn Peake. Consider the perspective difference first. We were observing a departing Alice in the Tenniel, taking on a companion, perhaps parental position against the precocious Alice, whereas in the Peake, we're receiving Alice into our world as a foreign entity, meeting her head-on from a position of mutual unsureness. I say this because there's an unknown quality to Alice herself in the Peake. She's half concealed, and what we can clearly make out is pale, sickly, older than Tenniel's swaddled Alice. There's a damp clinginess to Peake's Alice's dress, and a more feminine shape all around. The first signs of sexuality? Writer Graham Greene remarked on Peake's interpretation that although he enjoyed them immensely, Alice was too much of a gamine for his tastes. She looks vulnerable yet poised to attack at the same time. Look at those open-palmed hands. Ready to break a fall? Or ready to throttle a white rabbit? Finally, Tenniel frames Alice with far more ornamentation, both to imply a childish disregard for the fragility of boring things like clocks, but also as guides to Alice's proportionality. Peake gives us less of these signposts for size, save for the mirror itself that's only signpost is the emerging Alice. Both are beautiful, but what Peake loses to Tenniel's more detailed characterisation he gains in a mystery of circumstance. and the difference between a coming and a going Alice change what modes of reading are available to us. A great example, I think, of paratextual information opening and closing certain engagements with a novel. In the fantastical world beyond the mirror, Alice meets the Red Queen upon a hill and eventually surveils the land, making a startling discovery about this unreality. "I declare it's marked out just like a large chessboard," Alice said at last. "It's a great huge game of chess that's being played all over the world. If this is the world at all, you know. Oh, what fun it is. How I wish I was one of them. I wouldn't mind being a pawn, if only I might join, though of course I should like to be a queen best." Although the world through the looking glass resembles the space of a chessboard, with its alternating squares and its division by 64 via brooks, and the place of a chessboard, a place for chess pieces now come to life, it does not adhere to chess's rigid logics. It is chess slantwise chess, taking from chess its personnel and retaining its geometry, but warping its rules. For example, here's a chess composition Carroll provides for the text which, as Carroll Riley describes, to be strictly in accordance with the laws of the game. White makes 8 unanswered moves by black, in this case red, and the white king spends not 1, not 3, but 2 moves in check by the red queen. What should be immediately obvious is that this chess composition is decidedly not strictly in accordance with the laws of chess, but if you remember, that is not what Carroll said. Strictly in accordance with the laws of the game. Perhaps the game being mentioned here is not quite chess. In some ways, I think Through the Looking Glass gets right to the point of what literature does to not just chess, but all things within its purview. It channels just a sense of it, an angle usually hidden from the thing itself, and then having detailed that part of its soul, it puts that to purpose in a narrative, to share with others. The game being played is what you'd get if you just left those pieces alone for a little while and let them do their thing. And if our goal is Alice's queenhood, what better way for Alice and Carroll to imagine it than with the ready-made journey of the pawn? After all, pawns are the soul of chess, and perhaps the game is the collapsing of 2 souls. Chess's and Alice's. Or perhaps Carroll manages with his bizarre composition and remotely logical tale to give chess back to itself somehow contaminated by Alice's logic. Perhaps Carroll, striving for literary effect, had to drive chess mad. Alice would eventually royally ascend, reaching the 8th square at last, and upon arriving there, a golden crown materialises from thin air upon her head. The symbolism is obvious, but works quite nicely from a chess, narrative and character perspective. Alice's queenhood is a metaphor for the culmination of her journey towards self-understanding or womanhood. From a narratological perspective, it signals the denouement's beginning because the protagonist's adventure has offered its prize, and finally, it terminates the chess game, as pawns promoting to queens often do. And end the game she does, although somewhat unwittingly. Having had enough of the red and white queen's madness, she decides it's high time to remove the competition, capturing the red queen, and delivering mate to a slumbering red king in the process. She took her off the table as she spoke, and shook her backwards and forwards with all her might. The Red Queen made no resistance whatever, only her face grew very small, and her eyes got large and green, and still, as Alice went on shaking her, she kept on growing shorter, and fatter, and softer, and rounder, and the Red Queen turns into a cat. It was all a dream. However, Alice is told something by Tweedledum and Tweedledee during her traversal up the Looking Glass board. Something that brings her some consternation. "Why, you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If that there king was to wake," added Tweedledum, "you'd go out, bang, just like a candle." Whose dream was it? Was it hers, or the Red Kings? And if it were the Red Kings, how can she be sure that her victory was her own, her growth well earned, that she is not merely a figment of a chess piece's restful sleep? Life, what is it? But a dream. Although we as readers can exercise one of literature's most important scepticisms of just never believing anything a character or narrator ever said, we can assume, given Alice's constancy throughout the novels, that it is in fact her dream. But it does conceptualise chess and games in general within that meaning-making space that we only associate with ourselves. In that sense, Carol explores whether games can imagine us as much as we can imagine them. Whilst writing this video essay, I have played in my breaks 72 games of online chess, all roughly 3 minutes long, and I remember none of them. I don't remember how many blacks or whites I took, I don't know how many games I won or lost. All I know is that I played 72 games of chess and all of my white games started with 1 c4 because I'm a patriot. Is that lost time? Or the only time well spent? Therein lies the question. What is the value of chess? And is that value only understandable in the remotest madness of isolation, upright cats and disguised devils, and childish wonder? Note that these things are quite unproductive. Prisoners are kept in isolation away from the privileged positions of production. To their credit, no one has ever put a cat to work, and the child and gainful employment are supposed to be antithetical, though that is an eroding idea in some places in the US. Perhaps it shouldn't surprise then that these pinpricks of madness would take to chess, implying that time spent playing chess and reading literature is a sunk cost, a monumental waste of one's time, a madness as soon as it begins. But chess and literature challenge the claim to rationality that productivity and money, being the privileged concepts of our time, self-aggrandizingly award to themselves. Time is money, they say, but you can always make money. You can never make time. Chess may drive people mad, it may even keep mad people sane, but we have seen in these stories how chess can save people, particularly in times of difficulty. As a simple thing to do, it keeps people like Dr. B safe from the nothingness imposed upon them. As analogy, it keeps people like Mikhail Bulgakov safe from civil impingement, censorship, and the dangers of artistic expression. And as a malleable logic, it keeps people like Alice on the road they are meant to be on, moving towards their goals with chess as a guide. Literature, perhaps seeing in chess what it knows of itself, expresses in the end chess's evergreen sanity. Chess, like all stories, drives people to live. It keeps living people alive.
This video was created thanks to the generosity of the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, the British Library and Sharmanka Kinetic Theatre. It's been made as part of an experiment to see how much interest there is in this kind of academic video essay, so let us know what you thought in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe too. Thanks for watching.